All right. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Just say something in the comments just to make sure that we got everything working. I hope you guys can hear me, but well, this is the 7th episode of our meetup for Frontend Love. I would like to welcome everybody. We have a lot of quite exciting speakers tonight. We have 3 of them today. I'm going to bring up the first speaker really soon. Now, first of all, I just wanted to let you guys know that you can ask questions or make comments at any point whenever we're doing this. By the way, I'm Ben. I forgot to say, for those of you who have never seen me before, I started presenting those meetups not too long ago. I also emceed the last Frontend Love that we had not very long ago. And yeah, so now that with this whole crisis going on, we've been trying to get those meetups up and going every week. So yes, hi everybody. So yeah, so today we have 3 exciting speakers. So please make sure to make comments or ask any questions. We would love to show your reactions on the screen as we go. So let's go on to our first speaker. I'm gonna bring Anusha up to the screen. I think her camera is still loading. Let's see. But while we get her picture on the screen, let me just give you guys a quick introduction. So Anusha is actually a software engineer for Josh Software. She is based in India. And interestingly, she actually subscribed to our call for papers in the last Frontend Love. And unfortunately, we were not able to get on stage to get her on stage back then. But we were very happy and delighted to be able to bring her on stage today. And if I'm not mistaken, she's going to talk to us a little bit about multi-threading in JavaScript today, which is something exciting and fairly new. I guess we are all used to the single-threaded paradigm, I guess, with JavaScript. And well, I think her camera is still loading, but let me bring up her presentation as well while we wait for that. Maybe we can take a quick pause real quick until her feed is on. So Yos, you with us?
Yep.
Okay, I think Anusha is having some connectivity issues right now.
Okay.
So yeah, she dropped a few times. So I guess we're gonna take a quick break.
Sure.
Yeah, let's take a quick break just to see if we can figure out her connection, and we'll be right back with you guys. So we apologize for this technical issue we're having. So, and by the way, Yos is here with us as well, even though he didn't get to start the meetup today. So, how you doing,
everyone? Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. How are you tonight?
Doing pretty good as well. Just enjoying the lockdown, I guess.
Yeah.
I see Anusha coming back up. Let's give her some more moments. So, oh, there she is. Let me bring her up as well. There you go.
Hi, Anusha.
Hello,
Hey,
Anusha.
Vasily.
Hi.
So, Anusha, I just finished. I was just about done introducing you. I mentioned that you are a software engineer with Josh Software, and that you're based in India. That you're going to talk to us about multi-threading and JavaScript, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're doing right now in your, in this current moment in your career, and then we can go on to your presentation.
Sure. So basically, I work in various languages like Ruby, JavaScript, Golang, and moreover, I mostly like JavaScript and Docker. Yeah, looking forward for the talk.
Okay. Well, I guess let's get started and see how it goes. So yeah, I do notice that we have a little bit of a connection issue. So let's see how it goes. Maybe we'll bring it up and see, but if not, we'll just carry on with the presentation. So hopefully nothing's gonna go wary this time. So without any further delays, I guess the time is yours, Anusha. So I'm gonna get away from here with Yos, and please feel free to start your presentation. Oh, she dropped again, so. Let's give it a few more moments.
Yeah. Let's see how it goes, Ben. Otherwise, I think we will fill up some time maybe together.
Yeah, we can talk about the headlines that we shared today during our all hands. In fact, let me bring them up real quick. Maybe I can share my screen. But first, okay. Oh yeah. The first headline. First of all, let me throw this on a different screen so I can share it.
I think Anusha's back with a stable connection or not?
I do notice a little bit of a delay, I guess. Anusha, you with us?
Yes.
Okay, maybe we can give it a try now. So I guess Yos and I are gonna get away from here and finally leave you with your time. Maybe we'll share it off our cameras as well to see if that will help with the bandwidth. So, yep, time is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. So, assuming everyone can see my screen and me. So, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the viewers who are seeing from different time zones. So, today I'll be talking on multi-threading in JavaScript, myth or reality. So, my name is Anusha Bhat, and I'm a software engineer at Juice Software. You can find me on Twitter with the handle @AlienPilli. Before diving deep into the topic, let me tell you something about JavaScript. If you already know about it, then please bear with me. And if you are new to it, then you'll learn something new today. So congratulations for that. So what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a lightweight interpreted single-threaded language. And by single-threaded, we mean it can only execute one thing at a time. But we do write asynchronous code in JavaScript, don't we? Then how is it single-threaded? Let's see an example. So we have a simple attend function in which there is a log statement. Now what happens when we call this attend function? So I have a small video that shows what happens. And let's wait for it to load, and it's loaded. Okay. So here, as you can see, first attend is pushed to the call stack, then console statement is pushed to the call stack, and after it is executed, it is popped off as there are no more statements in the attend function to be executed. This was very easy and there was no rocket science in it, was it? No, not at all. So let's see what happens in case of an asynchronous function. So for the same attend function, I've added a set timeout, which after 6 seconds executes an anonymous function. Then there is a for loop. So obviously the asynchronicity here is a set timeout and not the for loop. So let's see what happens when we execute this code. Yeah. So here, when we call the attend function, first the console log gets executed, then the set timeout gets executed, in which a web API is maintaining the timer. Then a call stack is busy in executing the for loop. After the timer, an anonymous function is pushed to the callback queue. Meanwhile, a call stack is busy executing the for loop. After the for loop, the anonymous function is pushed from the callback queue to the call stack, and then it gets executed. So what were the things that we saw here? One was a web API. So what is a web API? A web API is provided by the browser, and their implementation varies from browser to browser. They can be accessible only through JavaScript. And they are also called as Browser Object Model APIs or BOM APIs. Then we saw the call stack. The call stack, along with the memory heap, forms the JS engine. Like in Chrome, we have the V8 engine. In Firefox, we have the Spider Monkey. Call stack is what makes JavaScript single-threaded. That is, at any given point in time, only one thing can be executed. Now, what if I tell you there is actually a web API using which we can make a background thread execute some code while a main thread is busy doing some other task like user interaction or something like that? Well, if you're thinking I'm crazy, let me tell you, I'm not crazy. My mother had me tested. So, what am I talking here? I'm talking about web worker. So, what is a web worker? A web worker is a web API for spawning a background thread. Using a web worker, we can actually execute some code in background without blocking the main thread. And using web worker, we can actually spawn an OS level thread. Wow, isn't that very cool that from a browser we can actually spawn an OS level thread? That means our browser is a very powerful software and we haven't paid much attention to it, have we? I don't think so. So, how is this web worker going to help me? What am I going to do with it? Let's see an example. So suppose you have a simple file validation in which you want to upload a file and you want it to be validated. Well, we can do the validation on the server side as well. But we don't want the validation on the server side as we want to save the round trip time. That's why we are going to do the validation on the client side. Now, as the file is being validated, we just can't show the user a loader. Well, we can show the loader, but I don't think showing a loader for a long period of time is a very good user experience. So for that, what I've done is I've embedded a small video so that the user can enjoy the video while the file is getting validated. So let's see its example. And I have a small video where you can actually see what happens when the file is being validated in the main thread itself. So here, I first upload a file, and when the file has been uploaded, I click on the validate button, which indicates that the file validation is progressed. Meanwhile, I'm trying to click on the play button of the video, and it's not playing. No matter how much I try, it's not playing. That's because a main thread here is busy in validating the file. And the video got played only when the validation has completed. So this is where web workers help us. So the same example I've implemented using web workers. So here, first, again, I upload a file, and when it has been uploaded, I click on the validate button, and when I click on the play button, the video gets played. Wow, that's a very nice dog. So what happened was here a main thread delegated the task of validating the file to the web worker, and hence it was free to handle the click event of the user. That is the click event of the play button. Now let's see how have I implemented it. So here basically I've spawned a new worker using this constructor of worker, and then I've sent a message to the worker using this post message to which I've just passed a file. Then I've added an event listener of message, which is basically to receive message from the worker, and when it has received the message, it correspondingly displays the success or error message on the screen. Now let's see the worker code. Here, basically I've added an event listener to receive the message. And when the message has been received, it just opens a file reader and validates the file. And then on success, it sends back the message back to the main thread. So basically here we are using post message to communicate between threads, and we basically have to add listeners for the sending and receiving of the messages. In text analysis, there are various examples like syntax highlighting, word count, character count, spell check. Here the key is swift feedback. That is, as soon as the user stops typing, that is, we show the output to him. Now, if it's a very small text, that doesn't matter much. But what if it's a very large text? In that case, the user would be waiting for the feedback while our main thread is busy in analyzing the text. So here's how WebWorker helps us. I have a simple example. So I have a simple example in which there is a text box and a text area for entering the words, which are to be checked in the dictionary if they're present or not. And then there is a text box to actually enter new words to a dictionary. So for now, my dictionary has very small number of words. So that's why as soon as I stop typing, it has shown the incorrect words 3, count is 3, and the number of incorrect words. And here I'm adding new words to the dictionary, and the count is decreased. Well, this isn't the cool part. The cool part is now I copy the same text, I copy the same and open it in a new URL. And if you have observed, then the incorrect words are again only 2, because here the words that we have added in the first tab got reflected in the second tab. Isn't that very cool? At least for me, it was. So let's see how we have done it. So yeah, this is the worker code. Here we are spawning a worker. Then on change of the text, we are sending a message to the worker, and then there's this port.start. If you had observed in the file validation example, and in this example, there is a difference in which we have spawned the worker. In the file validation, it was just new worker, whereas here it was new shared worker. This is because here we are spawning a shared worker. A shared worker is a worker that is accessible across multiple browsing contexts like tabs, windows, and not an incognito window, obviously. So like in a text spell check example, the main logic that is a spell check is common. That is, you open in tab 1 or tab 2, it's going to remain the same. That is, the text entered should be present in the dictionary, and words that are added in one tab should be available to the second tab. That's why we are using a shared worker. And the worker communicates with the browsing context through port. That's why we have this port. So port is basically the communication channel using which the workers communicate with each other. And this is basically when a new word is added, I send it to the spell check, so spell checker worker, so that it can add to the dictionary. And this is basically when the main thread receives message from the worker, and it correspondingly displays the progress or the output. This is the worker code. So here basically we have import scripts. Import scripts is basically used to import all the third-party JavaScript library or other internal JavaScript code that you are having. Then we have the connect. It is basically to connect to the port, and then we have message listener, which is basically to indicate that it is sending to send or receive message, and then we have port.start, which is basically to indicate that it can now accept the messages. Right. Was all this necessary? Like, if we have a small text or a small file, it won't have been made much a difference. But if it's a large file or a large text, the user would have been waiting for a long time and just staring at the screen. So, it is necessary because of a Rail guideline. Not this Rail guideline, obviously, because of this Rail guideline. So, this is basically a user-centric performance model that has been developed by the Chrome team. And there are four goals based on response, animation, idle, and load. And according to the response goal, any user input should be processed within 50 milliseconds so that there is a visible response within 100 milliseconds. Whoa, that's a very high standard. And standards are usually high so that they can be adopted, isn't it? So, according to it, what they're saying is the main thread should be idle as much as possible so that it can do the rendering thing and it can handle user input immediately. While the worker threads should be responsible for all the logic, processing logic, calculations, and other things. And this is not something new. Like in native platforms like Android and iOS, there's already support for this. In Android, we have async tasks, coroutines, thread pool executors, whereas in iOS, we have the Grand Central Dispatch. Now, even the web has support for it through web workers, and we should be adopting it since it's very nice and helpful. In times like this, it is very possible that our internet is not available or there is no electricity so that there is no internet and it's not possible to use an application. But what if I tell you there are some things in which you can actually use an app, web app, and that is possible because of service workers. Service worker acts as a proxy between the main thread and the network, and it actually decides whether to allow the request or to serve the request from its cache. So, to obviously to serve the request from its cache, it must have first intercepted the request and stored its response in its cache. Then only it is possible that it can serve from its cache. And based on that, there are several strategies available. Like there is network first, network only, cache only. And we can decide according to our logic what to do and what would be best for it. So some common use cases of service worker are like background data synchronization, resource requests from other origin, client-side compiling and dependency management, performance enhancement. Basically, suppose you have a photo album and you're viewing it on the web. Now, you can prefetch the photos that the user is likely to see in the near future. So it can also be in case of a paginated list, user is on page 1, and when he's scrolling down to the next page, we can prefetch some of the items that he's likely to see immediately, and then he can fetch the next items. So in that way, the user response is very smooth and he doesn't even know what is happening behind the scenes. I've talked all about thread.
Anusha, sorry to jump in real quick. I just have I guess a suggestion. We see that we're losing you for a few seconds with the connections issues. So we're just wondering if maybe we can shut off the camera so that we can give maybe maybe increase your bandwidth a little bit, if that's okay.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, and then we'll keep your screen up, and then we'll still be able to hear you, but then we save up on the bandwidth a little bit. Sounds good?
Yep.
All right.
Okay. Yep. So I've and all. So does this mean that do we now need to write about thread? Do we now need to write thread safe code in JavaScript? Wasn't JavaScript the coolest kid in which we didn't have to worry about mutexes, locks, and whatnot? Yes, it still is the coolest kid in which we don't have to worry about such things because each worker has its own worker global space and hence can't access the same variable. Each worker has its own event loop and hence they communicate with each other through message passing. Also, workers communicate with each other through message passing. That means it is based on structured cloning algorithm. That is basically serializing when sending and deserializing on the receiver side. So the supported types are basically all the types that support serialization and deserialization, like string, int, boolean, complex types like array, set, object, array buffer, image bitmap, image data, and the unsupported types are error, function, DOM node. Now the serialization and deserialization part, it works on small objects. But what if we have a very large object with around hundreds and thousands of keys or millions of keys? So in that case, serialization and deserialization will obviously take some time to send and receive. So in that case, what to do? So there we have transferable object. In case of transferable object, we pass the entire object from the main thread to the background thread. In that way, the ownership is transferred, and once transferred, the main thread or the parent thread can't have access. So that's also solved. In all the examples that we have seen so far, we haven't manipulated the DOM directly. It was always the main thread that was manipulating the DOM, and it was the worker thread that was giving its input. So, what if we try to actually update the DOM? So, yeah. So here basically this is an example in which uh, there is sum of two numbers, and using workers, I directly try to display the sum in the result box. So let's play the video, and yeah, when I click on the calculate sum, oops, we got an error. So let's see that error. The error is this: document is not defined. As of now, we cannot actually modify the DOM. This is because DOM is not yet thread safe. But in web graphics language, there is an API called as the off-screen canvas API, using which we can directly render to the browser without involving the main thread. So yeah, there is some hope in this direction. There are various libraries that promote the use of workers. Like there is Workerize for module loading of functions. There is React Native DOM, which is actually an alternative to React Native, in which all the rendering part is done by the main thread and all the component logic and app logic resides in the worker code. There is Gatsby plugin for introducing worker into Gatsby.js. Then there is Redux worker, in which actually the entire reducer is in the worker thread, whereas the app rendering part is in the main thread. Now, with the advent of PWAs, a lot of processing has been shifted to client side. Now, the client devices have also become very powerful, like we have quad core, octa core, and whatnot. Till now, JavaScript that we have written was utilizing only single core of the system. But now, we can actually write JavaScript using multiple cores of the system. And using multiple cores results in better performance of the web application, which results in more responsiveness, leading to a better user experience. We can also perform heavy operations like intensive number crunching, deep data modification, filtering of large lists, and that too without affecting the user interaction or user experience. But as I said earlier, we are actually spawning an OS level thread. That means it will consume system resources. No doubt, we have to improve the performance of web applications, but that doesn't mean we downgrade or lower the performance of the entire system. So, it's our responsibility to make sure that we do not overutilize the power that we have got. So, with great power comes great responsibility. And yeah, these are some references that I had followed. And I'm done. Thank
Yeah, Anusha, thank you so much. Maybe you can bring up your camera again real quick, if that's all right.
you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to show you some of the reactions that we had during this stream. By the way, I just
Oh,
wanted all the attendees to know that this is being streamed to both YouTube and Facebook. So if I show something on the screen, it might be that you don't see that in your chat, but it might be that it's in a different platform. So yeah, I was very impressed by your presentation. Maybe I can start with a question, actually. So you mentioned that now we are processing more stuff in the front end itself because the devices are becoming more powerful. So when would you say is the boundary where we say, okay, this should be in the back end or this should be in the front end because now we can make use of web workers? Like, what is the line that we can trace to be like, okay, this belongs in the back end, not in the front end, and vice versa?
Okay. So I think that actually varies from application to application. But suppose there is something user centric, that is centric only to the logged in user. In that case, we can do it on the client side. But suppose it's something there is generic, then I think we need to do it on the server side.
Okay. Yeah, I'm facing some of those.
Also, I would say like the core business logic should always be on the server side, and it's mostly the filtering stuff or something like that that would be on the front end.
Right, or maybe even sorting. Sometimes we try to
Yeah.
do it on the front end as well.
Hmm.
Although it does save a little bit of processing, right? When you actually do that in the front end and just think about presentation layer in the front end. But I just wanted to share a few more reactions with you. So indeed, this was a very good present. Oh, this one was there already. So indeed, it was a very good presentation. And there is a comment as well. So let's see. The use of service worker is only available for client-side JS or server-side JS. So do you have any answers for this one? I actually have a comment for it as well.
Mm, I think it's for servers, sorry, client side only, but need to check.
Yeah, if I understand it correctly, the web workers are for the client side, right? That's how you work on the
Yeah.
browser. But then on the back end, you have actual just workers, right? So that you can spun a new thread. So I guess this is being heavily used these days on Node.js only, right? And then I guess they had web workers for the browser. So there is one more question here just before we move along. Let's see. Can you use the cache API in workers? Good question. I'm not sure.
Cache API and workers. So, as far as I know, I don't think so. We can use that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about this one as well. And one last question from Firas. I'm gonna have to get back to you guys on that question. I guess he's asking you for your personal opinion, because is there any specific package to use with Angular, I guess, for workers? I'm not sure. I know that workers are a
Um,
native thing, right?
yeah, they are they are provided by the browser, but I'm not sure whether any specific package related to Angular. I haven't worked with it. Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say that as well. Like in one of the examples that you showed us, you're actually using the constructor of the worker class,
Yeah,
and I believe that is something that is available to, I mean, regardless
everyone.
of framework. So if you're working in
Hmm.
the browser, you have access to that tool. So,
Yes.
but yeah, well, Anusha, I just wanted to thank you once again for being with us tonight. It was a pleasure to finally have you here, and I apologize that we're not able to get you on stage the last time, but this time we're able to do it. And it was a blast. So thank you very much for being with us.
Yep. I also enjoyed the time. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, hopefully we can get you here once again in the future. So, yeah. All right. So we are going to move on to our next speaker. I'm going to bring Lucien up on the screen. Hey,
Oh
Lucien.
boy, hello.
that came quite fast, right? No.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to be in that soon. Wow.
Oh, sorry about
Hello.
that.
It is I and my industrial printer. We say welcome
I'm kind of hiding my place as well because my wife and I have recently moved to Purmerend. For those of you who are not familiar with the Netherlands, it's a little town a little bit above of Amsterdam, and our house is also a mess right now. So I'm hiding it so you guys don't see it.
I'm not ashamed of my printer, so.
But Lucien, so maybe I hope I'm getting your name right. So it has a little bit of a French in it, right, Lucien?
A petit peu, mais oui, yes.
So Lucien Immink. So Lucien is actually a longtime friend of ours. Well, first of all, he's a software architect and a front-end evangelist at Isaac. And Lucien actually approached us a while back in order for us to work together and prepare a conference in Eindhoven. So we actually had the Frontend Love Eindhoven version of the conference, and it was amazing, right? So we had 250 people over there?
Yeah, about yeah, to 20, to 30, something like that.
Yeah, it was a very exciting conference. You actually gave a presentation that day too.
Yes, and without spoilering, if you've been there, you can do something else right now because it will be exactly the same, only in a different setting.
Yeah. I would be too excited about it though, because I'm pretty sure that you know that rule that sometimes you get out of a place with only 20% of the talk. So I'm ready to listen to you again because it was awesome.
Right.
It had something to do with web components, right?
Yeah. It's,
I don't want to spoil it.
No, not too much. We'll get into the details when I start. But yes, the main topic is about web components, and yeah, if they can help you out in some situations. I wouldn't say it will be all situations, of course, but maybe you're building something and you're like, I think I've done this before in a different library. Should I do it again?
There you go. Well, just before we jump in, so people, get to know a little bit more of your personal side. Maybe you can share a little bit about what's going on in your life right now in your current role, and then we can jump right into your talk.
Sure thing. Yeah, right now, of course, just like almost everyone in the Netherlands, I'm working from home, and this is, well, it was my favorite chair, and maybe nowadays it isn't anymore because I'm spending way too much time in this thing. Nah, it's fine. We at Isaac, we are mostly working on complex internet-based questions, mostly regarding e-finance or e-commerce. So you need to sell something or you need to buy something, and you probably want to buy something with something that we want to build for you. And me as a software architect, I'm hovering over the developers, making sure that we take the best approach for the task at hand and try to please the customers that we have as much as possible, while still having an interesting day and not just repeating ourselves with tricks we've learned from a few years back.
Great.
That's about
Well,
it, I think, in a nutshell.
Yeah, to us it's an honor to have you here. So let me not take up too much more time, and let's bring up your screen. And the stage is yours, Lucien.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. My talk is called "One Component Today Keeps the Doctor Away." When I thought about this name, the world was a different place. I didn't know that it was going to be like this. It has nothing to do with the thing that we're in right now. It's just a pun with the if you eat enough vegetables on a day, you'll keep the doctor away. And in this case, I would say you don't have to redo your whole stack in one go if you can upgrade component by component. And why I was thinking about this concept of replacing components is that in my spare time I like to make my own software, and since I'm addicted to music, one of the things that I bought a few years back is a is a NAS, so a network attached storage device, and it came with a music player, but it sucked balls. Sorry for my French, but it was terrible. So what I wanted to do there was find out if I can make my own music player. And one of the most important things that you have to do in a music player, well, for me at least, is to be able to show the correct album art. So I had a question for myself. I'd like to display album art. And I know that I have an artist, and I know that the artist made an album. So for example, my favorite artist is called Arian, and he makes albums. So I want to show on my page about the artist Arian a nice image about the guy himself. One of my favorite bands is Tool, and they've made a CD called Enema, and it has album art. So I want to show the correct album art. And although the question is quite easy, I've got a name, I need a picture. There is quite some work that you need to do. Firstly, you need to find out, firstly, you need to find the album online. You need to cache it for the next time you want to get the same album art. It's not like we have to download it over and over and over again. And since I'm not entirely sure where I want to put that album art on my page or in my application, I want to optimize the image for the required dimensions. And well, there can be a lot of things. And if you do them all, well, then of course you win the internet. But I want to do it all without bothering the other developers. So in my dream, okay, that wasn't a real dream, but I had a vision where I could make the one album art component for everyone. So if you wanted to use it in React, be my guest. If you want to use it in Angular, be my guest. But when I started out, I was like, okay, maybe I can write that logic because it isn't that much, right? I can just present it in a script and you can use that script. So I have my album art. I put in my artist in my album. I have some magic. And when the magic is done, I return the magic. And in this case, the magic that it's returned is in the form of an image tag. Okay. And then I can use that in a script. That script even in a page. So I include my album art script of Albuma art script. And I have some placeholder in my page where I want to put the album art that comes out. And I just use my function. I put in the artist tool and the album vir inoculum. And at the end, I get, like I said, I get an image tag. Well, surely you won't use that because then you're trusting external HTML, which is something that you should never ever trust. So we need to do something else. And actually, it could work. We could rewrite it that it doesn't return an image tag, but then I return only the URL, and the developer that is going to implement this needs to, for example, make sure that he or she is adding the alt text. He or she is adding the right dimensions. So we need more shared knowledge. Or I can provide you with an example and you can copy paste that example. And if you want a different dimension, I provide you a different example and you can copy paste that. But in the end, who is responsible for the styling? And the styling in an album art isn't that big, of course. It's not that much. But if it becomes more and more complex and we want to do more and more things, we'll have that question: who is responsible for the styling? And of course, in this case, an iframe is not a solution. I can use an iframe, but I don't want to use the iframe, for example, on my mobile devices. So one of my colleagues said, well, just make it in Angular or React or Vue or Svelte or whatever it will be tomorrow. But I was just using the other one of the other frameworks. Oh yeah, well in that case, have fun rewriting that enormous component in that other framework. And if you could do me a favor, use TypeScript from today. I'm off for a beer or maybe two, and I'll see you later. Said your least favorite coworker or boss type of person, or well, whoever it said. My name is Lucien Immink. I already introduced myself, but in this presentation, well. And hopefully I'm not that least favorite person I was referring to, because I'm here to help you out. Again, this is my face, and I think I'm still the same. Awesome. I'm a software architect and a web evangelist at Isaac in Eindhoven, and Eindhoven. Here it is in Eindhoven. Not everybody maybe knows where this is. Luckily, it's just a web, so I can zoom out, and it's in the north side of Eindhoven, which is in the south side of the Netherlands, which is somewhere in Europe, which Earth. Tonight I want to talk about web components, and to know where web components can help, we need to understand firstly what a web component is. And a web component is built from a few basic rule sets. The first of them is a template, and a template is an element mechanism for holding HTML. So just like any other HTML tag, you can use it in your page. So for example, I have a template in which I can put a card, in which I can put an image, in which I can put a paragraph. I can use new elements called slots to add extra information where the template can determine where it will be rendered with a fallback, in this case artist name or artist bio. And fun thing with a template is that it's not live. So if you add it to your page, no calls will be made to fetch that image that we just saw. No CSS will be applied to any of the HTML elements inside this template. And if you add a script in the template, nope, it won't be executed. But we can use JavaScript to use the template. So at first we start with checking if our environment knows what a template is by creating a new template, and if it works, then okay, we can continue. Once we know that we can use the template, we can query the template and import the contents of the template. And on line 5, I've added the word true at the end, and that means that I'm actually using it as a clone, and I'm not moving it over, because if you move it over, you can only use it once, and if you clone it, you can use it multiple times. Inside that clone, which is a DOM segment, you can query again, for example, the image. You can set the source tag attribute to the URL that you want. And if you then add the clone to the document, it's live. And it also means that at that time, the images are fetched, the CSS is applied to those nodes, and if there's script in your template, that will be executed. The next part of web components is the one that's most visible, actually, and that's custom elements. Because the custom elements give you the ability to create a custom element that encapsulates your functionality on an HTML page, rather than that you have to do with long nested batches of elements that together provide a custom page feature. Wow, okay. So what does that mean? That actually means that you don't have to copy paste a whole set of DOM elements anymore if you encapsulate it in one custom tag. From that moment on, you can use just that tag. How do we use it? How can we use it? Well, at first, we need to extend an element. So in this case, I've extended the basic HTML element in my class album art, and I have there's a constructor where you need to call super, and afterwards for the construction of the HTML element, and afterwards you can add your magic, do everything you want in your custom element. Every time this custom element is initialized, the constructor is run, and your magic is executed. But without the page knowing that your custom element is actually a thing, it won't do anything. So that class that we just made, we can define it on the custom elements to declare that from now on, every time this page sees a tag called album art, it will initialize an instance of the class album art. A cool feature is that you can also extend current HTML elements, like for example, the HTML UL element. So that means that you can extend a predefined element in HTML. And well, the thing is, do you really need it? And isn't it confusing? Because you won't see in the HTML, you won't see it anymore that it's a custom element, because you're just overriding or extending a predefined element, in this case the UL. Well, luckily you have to put on the attribute is to define that you're using a custom element, and in this case I'm defining a list class that extends UL. So in my HTML snippet, I can use that the unordered list is now rendered by using the list. Since I'm extending an element, I get everything that that element does for free. That can also mean the scripting that could be part of that element. The fun fact is, of course, if something goes wrong with loading your custom elements, or you have a environment where custom elements are not supported, you have a fallback. So that's a bonus that you get from extending the predefined elements. And the cool thing is, you can use those custom elements now anywhere. Once they're declared, you can use them anywhere in your page. So in this case, I have an article for my artist called Tupac, and of course I'm using the gangsta Lord Mizzle Mashizzle here. If you want to know more, visit this URL. You can generate your own. You can generate your own Lorem Ipsum gangsta style. There are certain lifecycle callbacks that you can call on or extend if you want, and those make a custom element quite interactive. So for example, you have the connected callback, and every time that a custom element is appended to a document element, this callback is called. So if you want, for example, add an animation, you can do that here. The same thing goes the other way around. You have the disconnected callback, so that means that it's invoked every time when the element is disconnected from the document's DOM. For example, you remove it from the DOM. You have an adopted callback, which is called every time you move the document between, you mean you don't move the document. No, you move the element between documents. So for example, two tabs next to each other, and you drag and drop it from one tab to the other. And one other that's very important is the attribute changed callback, which is invoked every time that one of the attributes has changed. It's in the name. It's quite self-explanatory. Luckily, of course, this one is one that you will use a lot. Well, no, I won't. I wanted to say something, but I won't. You will use it. Another part of the web components standard is the shadow DOM, and the shadow DOM makes it all a little bit spooky, shadowy, less opaque, a bit opaque actually, because the shadow DOM allows you to have hidden DOM trees that are attached to the element inside the regular DOM tree. So you can have a whole DOM tree be a part of an element, while for the document itself, it's not part of the DOM. So here's a lovely visualization of it, where you have the document where the shadow host is the element itself, and inside the shadow host, you have a shadow root with the elements that are part of the shadow DOM, which are still not purely visible for the document in which you render the page. To attach such a shadow DOM to your element, you have to call the this.attachShadow, and you can add a mode parameter to it or option to it, and that's either open or closed. And open means that you can access the element from outside this root, and closed means that the access is denied. The default, by the way, is open. And even if you close your DOM, your shadow DOM, there's still ways to access the elements inside the shadow DOM. The benefits are little to close it. So my best guess is not to use it that much unless you really, really need to. So how is a shadow DOM created? Well, at first we start with a wrapper. In this case, I create an element which is called a div. I can add a class to it. I can add an image to it. I can have a placeholder image for it, or maybe I can update the image URL based on the attribute that I get in my component, and that this is normal DOM manipulation or normal DOM adding, and in the end I just have to add it to that shadow that I just made, and I can use it inside my element. I can use it to also style the elements. So in this case, I have created a simple style element in which I've put two selectors, one for the wrapper and one for the image. And the beauty is, because we're inside the element, we are only styling the element, the classes or the elements that are inside our custom element. Not so. The fact that I'm saying that my image is display block and has a width of 100% and a height of 100% doesn't mean that it's for every single image on the document. It's only for the images that are present inside this custom element. The thing is, you can also add external CSS if you want to, because it's just simple DOM. So you can create a link to a style sheet, which resides somewhere, but what is that URL exactly? So if you don't know where your custom element is used, so you cannot possibly know where the CSS is unless you're using an absolute URI, or well, maybe better yet, don't use external CSS at all. Embed the CSS that's part of the element. Your custom elements are probably small enough to have just a few lines of CSS needed. So before we move on to how we can use the custom elements, one thing to notice is that a few years back, the Chrome team started with the custom elements and the web components standards, and that standard wasn't the standard. Microsoft has some knowledge about creating standards that aren't standards, but the Chrome team wanted one as well. That became the V0 standard, which was, for example, used on YouTube for a while. Don't use them anymore. Don't use them. They are outdated. They only worked in Chrome. They were only implemented in Chrome, and they're deprecated. If you want to use a web component, by all means follow the web components version 1 standard, which is the one that's, for example, on MDN and on the Chrome developers website as well. So I've shown you what a web component is. I've shown the different parts of a web component with the shadow DOM, with the custom element, with the template. So how can we integrate a web component inside our application? Well, it actually depends on what type of framework you're using. For example, if you're using Angular, you need to import a custom elements schema from the Angular core, declare it in your ng module, then you can import your components and you can use it. Rather straightforward. React is even easier in this case. You can straight use it. And for Vue, it's important to declare Vue 2 in this case. It's important to declare that you tell the compiler to ignore everything that starts with or has your name of your element of your custom element inside. So in this case, I ignore album art in the Vue compiler, and afterwards I can import my component and use it in my template. Funny thing, of course, is that Vue is actually using web components well, the template part of the web components inside the view files themselves. So for creating web components, you can use the native web components API, which I've shown. And if you want to build a bit more of those, a bit more components, or want to reuse, for example, your view rendering that you already have in place, there are some libraries that makes your life easier. Also, for example, for importing and making the components available in your JavaScript environment. I've listed a few. These are, of course, not all the libraries that are available, but these are the most used. Lit element is the new thing which replaces Polymer. So if you search for Polymer or have heard of Polymer, search for lit element instead. These libraries will help you to be more productive. They help you in setting up and deploying the examples, building the elements, optimizing them already for the different environments and so on. I also wanted to note out for this list that Stencil is built by the guys and girls that made and are making the Ionic framework, which used to be Angular only, and then they built web components, and then they shifted Ionic to Vue and React as well. Stencil is really an amazing tool to build a bigger set of components, to really build a component library. Skate, I've added that to this list because the cool thing about Skate is that you can define which tool you want to use to build your DOM nodes with. Do you want to use React, Lit, or Preact? That's all fine. You can Skate has adapters inside the library to so that you can write your templates, you can write your shadow DOM using React or Lit, for example, and then use Skate to wrap it in the in web components and having the lifecycle hooks attached to the elements. So I want to move on to some examples because the proof is in the pudding, they always say. And the first example is close to my heart because I have to write a lot of those UML diagrams to get the overview for all the different applications, but also for the classes that we have inside the applications that we're building at Isaac. And one of the things that's really important there is that you have up-to-date documentation. Because if your documentation is out of date, the documentation is useless. And I always forgot, well, we have a planned UML server at Isaac, but I always forget to recreate the images once I've updated my class diagrams. With the web component plant UML renderer, I don't have to do that anymore because this image is generated on site. So if I change my UML diagram, the image is automatically updated using the server, the plant UML server that's in the attribute server. One of the other things that I use is the API viewer component. For example, in Stencil, you can export your custom elements as a JSON file, which has the properties, attributes, events, and so on. Which is a JSON file, and with this web component API viewer, I can easily render that as an HTML block that I can use in my documentation again. So instead of having to write this page itself, it's that the contents is generated from my web components library. The output is a web component itself that is automatically updating the contents every time the custom elements JSON is changed. But there are many other components. It's not only things like diagrams and images, image outputs. You can also think about utility components that you've built over and over again, like for example a grid, or maybe a modal, a wizard, a takeover, an endless list, and this list could go on forever as well. But I want to go back to where I've started, album art, because I've wanted to create an album art web component, and here it is. Well, actually, I have this this presentation online, and I can share the URL afterwards. The fun thing is that because it's all just HTML, DOM, normal JavaScript, normal CSS, and also this presentation is I can actually run this part of the site. So on the left hand side now I have my editor, and on the right hand side I see the output. And in this case I've listed that I have two album arts, one for the band the artist The Gathering, and one for the album Fear Inoculum by Tool. But I can easily change this. For example, one of my other favorite bands is The Killers, and if I run it again, it will fetch the album art for The Killers and put it in instead of The Gathering. But maybe I want to make that album art a little bit bigger, so one in a row for every album art, like this. But yeah, it's you can play along. You can do with it whatever you want. Well, you can render album art. The heavy lifting for the album art, the fetching, the placement, the size, all that is all done in the component itself. If you want to use it, the only thing that you really need to know is copy pasting this simple line album art with the artist that you want, and you're done. So let's close the editor again. And so it comes to this. I've shown you that I can make an album art component. Yay. What I wanted to show you was that with the album art, we have an API to create new custom reusable HTML tags with controlled style and markup that hopefully don't leak to the outer document. And what I've shown you is that custom components that are built on the web component standard will work across modern browsers and can be used with any JavaScript library or framework that works with HTML. I've shown you that web components are templates, custom elements, and a shadow DOM. And hopefully I've shown you that they can integrate with modern frameworks that we all use, that you can even use multiple libraries to create your own custom elements if you want to. And personally, I still think that they have a great future. Sorry. And one thing that I know for sure is that, yeah, they can fetch my album art. And with that, I say thank you.
Amazing presentation, Lucien. I actually
Thank
have
you.
some questions of my own as well, but
Right.
maybe we can go and show you some of the reactions or slash questions that we get from our attendees. I do see a question coming right up. So, can you overwrite the style of an element attached to the shadow DOM? Good question.
It sure is. Yes and no. As far as I know, the answer is yes and no. It depends on if you have opened your shadow DOM with the mode open or closed. And with an open shadow DOM, yes, you can override the style if you want to. Again, if you want to do that, it requires shared knowledge. So what you normally would do is that inside the custom element, where you want the places to be variable in the styling, make it a CSS variable, right? And then you can override the CSS variable in the DOM of the document, and it will be used in the element as well. So then it's more controlled, because otherwise, if you do it with JavaScript, for example, what you normally see is that the web component isn't built by the same team or even the same team member. And if the API internally changes, then you could even break it if you override it yourself.
I think adding this tiny little bit of the customization, I guess, defeats a little bit of the purpose of the web components, I guess, because if you keep giving developers the ability to override those styles, then you lose, I guess, what you gain from the consistency of having web components, right?
Yeah. And then that's also the places where I see web components having a future is where you want to use the custom feature that is built and is encapsulated in the custom element as a black box that you don't even want to know what's going on. You just want to use it. So, for example, with the plant UML renderer example that I've shown, I'm actually I don't care about how it even works. The only thing I care about is that the output is that image that otherwise I should update myself.
That's right.
So it's really depending on what you want to do. If a web component is the correct choice.
I guess in this case, it's kind of like when I asked my my professors back in college, and all of them would always say it depends. That was the that's the good answer, I guess. Now there was another comment from Alessandro. He's saying it's quite hard to work with custom elements in React due to the React's terrible compatibility and prop handling. I mean, I guess React and web components, they're there for different purposes. So we're talking apples and oranges, right? So, but I guess I'll go ahead and read this. This is straight from React's website. It does say that as a developer, you're free to use React in your web components or to use web components in React or both. And you did mention something like this, right? You can use them one in each other pretty much, right?
Yeah.
But with your experience, though, have you seen any caveats, I guess, to using web components with different libraries such as Vue and React?
Yeah, in that case, I'm actually one of the 6 developers in the world that isn't using React at all.
Awesome.
Whoa, yeah. Well, I'm Angular and Vue and native, but I've actually, for some reason, never used React. Whoa.
Yeah, I'm actually a React developer myself, and I've been slowly learning Vue and I guess automatically migrating towards other frameworks as well. Even though React is not a framework, let me just put it out there. But cool. I guess one last question for you, Lucien, if you can enlighten us, because you work in a leadership position at Isaac, I guess, because that's how I said it in the first when we first started. So can you give us a business perspective maybe on why an organization would choose to use web components, for example? What kind of value does that bring to an organization as a whole?
Well, we've seen a few. One is so, for example, you're migrating from one front-end framework to another due to in this for example, the client has a web application that they've asked you to build 7 years ago, and they're now migrating to a new framework. One of the benefits of a web component in this case can be, I'm not saying that you always should go that way, but it can be that you use the web components to not migrate the whole application in one go, but just one component at a time. So encapsulate it in a web component in your new technology stack. For example, you're going from Angular JS to Vue. You can write your complex component in Vue, encapsulate it in a web component, and still use it in your Angular JS current website. And once all the components are rewritten, you can drop the web components again. So in that case, they're just there for a certain amount of time. One other way where you can use it is the reusability. Personally, I think I have written or used 6 or 7 different date pickers in my day, because I had the perfect date picker in jQuery 10 years back, or maybe even in Flash. and then I needed to migrate to jQuery, to Knockout, to AngularJS, to Vue, to Svelte, to whatever's next. And if you have to, what's the business value in rewriting a date picker over and over and over again? Maybe
Yeah.
if it's such an encapsulated feature as a date picker, make it once.
Right? So we don't have to do
Hopefully.
the same work again and again. It's funny because I think some of our attendees are younger than the word Flash. So it's but
sorry.
no, sorry. That
Uh,
goes along to say a lot about your experience. So but with that, I would like to thank you again, Lucien, for
right.
preparing this presentation for us, I guess, to represent this, right? Because I had the pleasure of watching you give this presentation back in Eindhoven. And it was an honor to have you here today. And I really hope that we can have you over once again.
Yeah, let's see. Hopefully in person next time. But yeah, it was fun to do. So good luck with the other meetups that you have, and I'll see you around.
Thank you very much.
Right.
All right. So I would like to bring up our next speaker. So I'm going to bring Rolf up real quick. Hey, Rolf. Oh, I think you're muted. Let me unmute you. Oh, I can't unmute you. So you got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi there.
Awesome. I can hear you loud and clear.
Great.
Yeah. Welcome, Rolf. Maybe I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. So Rolf Strijdhorst.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I've been working on my Dutch, so.
Well, not very good.
Yeah. So, Rolf, as far as I understand, you're a software developer, development engineer at Sogeti or Sogeti. How do you say the name of your company, real quick?
Well, even inside our own company, we have difference of opinions. So, some people will say Sogeti, the other one will say Sogeti, and the other one will say Sogeti.
Sogeti. Okay, so I guess it really depends on where you're from, right? We have such a multicultural environment here in the Netherlands when it comes to working with technology. So, but yeah, so Sogeti, I guess that's easier for me to say.
Yeah.
But we're always happy to have people from Sogeti here because Sogeti has actually worked very closely with us before to organize our community meetups back in the day. And Sogeti also helped us quite a bit with financial support for the Frontend Developer Love Conference in the past. So yes, we're very grateful for all this work and also very happy that you're here today. And if I understand correctly, you're going to talk to us about functional programming, correctly?
Yeah, correct. Mostly about functional programming in relation to object or imperative programming.
Yeah, and this is actually a subject that interests me a lot because a lot of people who use JavaScript are not even aware of it, but they're using a lot of elements from functional programming there, and they don't even know.
Yeah.
But before we go into your talk, maybe you can just share a little bit with us about what you've been doing and some of the things you're doing in your current role at work, and then we can jump right into your talk as well.
Okay, well, of course, some of this will also be in my presentation, but yeah.
Then you know what? Let's not do that. Let's go straight to your presentation. Then, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, no problem.
You're prepared, man.
I'm prepared. Hold on, I was prepared.
There you go.
Application window, and there it is.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring it up. Well, the show is yours, Rolf.
Thank you. Hold on, I'm going to. Okay. Well, thank you, Ben. Let me tell you, I want to bring this talk about functional programming to space and beyond, meaning I want to talk about not just purely functional programming, but just a bit more to touch what the normal developer can do with it, and what even some best practices in normal development. But so let me introduce myself. As you see, I'm Rolf Strijdhorst. I'm a software engineer. I'm a jack of all trades. I work with Lotus Domino, HTML, Java, Elixir, Python, Perl, and JavaScript. I also worked a bit with Lotus Domino, HTML, backend on the front end, and databases and source control management, all that kind of stuff. what I like to be is, you can see me as some kind of the Riconsante from the Expanse. It takes you about anywhere. You can do a bit of fighting, transportation, and serves as a passenger fighter. So that's me. I can do anything. I'm not an expert at everything, but I will take you anywhere and I get the shit done. So let me talk about functional programming. How it starts? Well, for me, it started with the frustration about the complexity of object-oriented programming. For instance, in Java, when we write a construct, it's always you have a verb and a noun. For instance, the equals, you have object.equals. It can never be just equals and give it 2 parameters. And also, what we found out is in most languages is that the writer must tell the computer how to do stuff. And functional programming allows the writer how to tell the computer what to do. So that takes a lot of the plumbing away from the developer because it's already there. It's built into the language, or it's built into the framework, but at least you don't have to consider how does the computer do this. So in the early days, when we start learning how to program, we learn how to programming in an OOP style, or better, an imperative style. And OOP favors imperative style in classes, right? We learn it in schools because it's the most popular way of programming. And these days, we also try to treat JavaScript even as an OOP language, right? So it's kind of like an ad hoc solution. Well, let me tell you about, okay, this is for the beginner programming, and just a refresher. We have, in Java, we have a construct like this, a class person, right? We have a private string first name with private string surname, a gender object within it, and then we have this method in the person class called getFirstName, and it returns the first name, and we have a string say hello to the person, right? So the person always knows how to say hello. Well, consider this in FP, right? Most of the time we learn functional programming in terms of archaic languages like Haskell or Clojure or Scala. And well, Scala and Clojure have the advantage that it's built onto the JVM. So a lot of the libraries that are built in Java are accessible in these 2 languages, and this helps a lot. Well, but in fact, the functional programming is one of the oldest forms of programming, right? It's even the Turing machine, the one that it was developed during the Second World War, was built using functional program constructs. Well, these days, we also try to treat JavaScript as a functional programming language. So, hey, this is weird. We have JavaScript as a functional programming language. We have JavaScript as an object-oriented programming language. It's some kind of hybrid language. Well, in my opinion, this can be good because this allows developers to either use or both or one or the other. But it allows developers to migrate from one path to another path, learning new ways of thinking. So let me use the same construct that we first had in object-oriented style, now in a functional style. So again, we have this construct, a person, and now I filled in some of the details already, but now you have the first name, you have the surname, and you have a gender. And you have a separate function set, say hello, right? And you provided a function. So the person knows how to, the function knows how to say hello when the person is provided. Okay. So what does FP give us? That's the most important one. Well, it has some main concepts. It allows us to reason about code. And how does it do this? Well, I will talk on this further, but the fundamentals are aligned within the mathematics of all kinds of stuff, and mostly of a field in mathematics called category theory or algebra. And algebra is the one that we learn in high school. Also, FP gives us an easy way to test, because functional programs, at least the functions within functional programs, tend not to work with side effects. And this is a key concept. You have to really be careful about this one. But having no side effects means it is very predictable. On that later. Another part of functional programming is it gives us the ability to reason about performance. For instance, we can, if we use another part of functional programming that's very important, and it's immutability. And immutability is something that gives the virtual machine a means of not storing much information on the heap of a program, on the memory part of the JVM, but keep stuff in the stack, which allows for better optimum memory management. Because one of the most not predictable ways and performance losses is something that is something that kicks in when the virtual machine stops and clears up the heap, right? So this is something that allows the way of thinking with functional programming gives us. Okay, well, the main concepts again. We have data. And data, of course, that's the state of the application, right? Then we have functions. And functions are matters of morphisms, calculations. Morphisms, I mean, those are the things that change data, that work upon that data, on that state. And then we have effects. And effects are something that we consider as I/O or email or working into the database. But so it's something that happens afterwards, after a while. It's most of the times what these days what we consider asynchronous efforts. It's not really necessarily asynchronous, but it's an easier way to think of it. It will happen eventually. That's something that an effect has. Well, how do we reason about codes? Okay. Again, I told you this is something that we spoke about because it has its foundation in mathematics, right? It's based on the category theory, and it is state. And what we can do is we can think of it like, okay, we have an input and we have an output, and it doesn't change. So it allows us to, if we give it a correct name, it allows us to think of it in some way that we can understand it by just reading it. We don't have to be the computer itself. We don't have to work through all kinds of loops. We can just read the code and it's there. It should be comprehensible to us. So we have the strict separation of concepts because we have data and state, and we have operations on data, and we don't think of, we need to encapsulate everything. No, we have strict data structures and we have strict functional structures, and even functions can be treated as data. Okay. How does it help us with testing? Well, this is something that I want to give to you as the normal developer in all kinds of situations. It doesn't really, it isn't really special for functional programming developers, but it's also special for object-oriented or declarative programming. So my thing is, and I shamelessly borrowed this from a guy called Elliot, and I forgot his last name, but he is one of my favorite functional programming tutors. So if we look at testing, it should be readable. So we should know about what is it, which component are we testing, and it should be all very small functions. It should be isolated or integrated, never both. Because isolated is we have no side effects, so we can just test this small function. We don't need to mock it, and that's part of the isolated. Or integrated. And integrated means we test a chain. Because mocking itself is, in my opinion, some sort of a code smell. Because we don't really test the behavior of the thing that we're mocking. So we can never be really certain if that mocked surface is actually behaving as the real thing. So that's why isolated or integrated. It should be thorough. Don't test just the happy path. Also test the wrong path. This is something every developer works against, and we like to be very, very optimistic. And well, from my experience, most of us just test the happy path and say, "Hey, this works. Continue." Then it also should be explicit. Avoid before each. Avoid magic, right? So in a lot of test cases, what we see is we have these befores, before each, already after each. We have setups and all that stuff. Is this really a good way of thinking about tests? In my opinion, if you give the setup in the test itself, it will be much clearer to the developer or the developer that is coming after you to understand what the test is testing than if we put it at some other place somewhere else in the code. So this is why I said explicit is very important. Okay. Performance. As I said, let's work on the heap. Immutable state allows also for parallelism. So if we provide a list to a function, and the framework knows it's not working with mutable state, but it knows that it's working with immutable state. It knows it can divide every item on that list to a specific workers or threads, because it doesn't really matter in which order it just is executed, as long as we get a result back. So this is very important. And we also don't have race conditions, right? We don't have items that says, okay, we have a change, for instance, on the gender part of the person class that I said, that I showed earlier. But that one item will just change and another item will try to grab or get a hold onto. It's not possible, because everything is isolated and internal of the function itself. And beyond that, there will be no race conditions. So this allows us to think about performance as well. Okay, how do we work with FP? Well, as I said before, immutable state. It's very important that we consider this. Keep your state immutable. How can we do this? It's very easy. We can create copies. JavaScript is not that nice to us, but we can still work with a lot of these items. For instance, learn your functions. Don't use functions that change in state. For instance, we have the slice and the splice functions. I always forget which one the correct one is, but I think it's the splice that returns a copy of the correct of a new array. So use that. Make sure that you're not using side effects. And a small example is well, no, not a small example. Think of it as the I/O and the email and fetching from the database. Do that as least as possible and push them as far away to the borders of the applications. For instance, if you have a web application, do some fetching before you enter your business logic, so you will get all the data inside your business logic, and do some stuff after you got to your business logic, but not in between. Don't jump into a side effect or an effect and go back straight into your business logic. Make sure that you're very careful about separating all these items. Okay, let me show you an example on the side effects as well. Here, for instance, we have on the top part of this slide, we have this part of the books. This is an array. And if we want to add something to this array, for instance, we want to add an author, what we would normally do, the way we are traditionally taught, is we create a new array, and then we have for a new instance integer, we continue to loop for until the length of books. We increase the integer, and then we fetch the item of the books, we add it an author field, and we push it into the new array. This is quite cumbersome, if I must say. This is we tell the computer exactly what to do. And as I told you before, functional programming is all about what to do and not how to do it. So if you look at it in a more functional way, we have this list of books. We map over it, and for each element in that book, we create a new copy. We do this in the ES6 style of the destructuring, and we add an author field to it, and that's it. Map will push it to the new array. So we have a completely new, immutable, well, not the same value of the previous books, so we can use books in some other location as well without the changes of having an author, and we can work with the X new list, right? So this is important because this is what I want to give you as an OO developer. In the OO world, we tend to work with design patterns, right? We want to make our our applications and our products as flexible and predictable as possible, right? In the functional world, we don't use design patterns. We use something else. We use the more mathematical constructs, but basically it boils down to different names for the same constructs or the same problem-solving issues. So don't get messed up or get afraid of all these new words that you will learn when you head into the functional programming world. There's just a lot of the things that are just the same because, well, it's just a way to convey meaning, right? And in our world, we use one word, and in functional programming, we use another word. So again, design patterns, just a way to convey meaning. Don't think of it as this is something that must be in my application. Most of the time, when I use a design pattern, I just afterwards discover, hey, I use this pattern. So when I talk with my coworkers, I say, I use this factory pattern, or I use an adapter pattern. And that's it. I don't go intentionally in search for a pattern. That, in my opinion, that's not how a design pattern works, to purposely use that pattern there. Okay. As I said, so it's a way to describe code construction in the OOP world. And in functional programming, it's formalized in mathematics. So it's actually more precise because the mathematics are indisputable. In design patterns themselves are not indisputable. There are variations possible, but mathematics, well, you can use other functions, but those are not the same thing. So what we can do is I can give you a list of elements or patterns that are more or less the functional way of looking at it. So let me tell you this. We have in object-oriented programming, we have an adaptive pattern. So if we are now in functional programming language, we use a map. That's simple. We alter the state of some data. So a new surface will be able to work with that new state of data. That's basically what a map does for us. We have a visitor pattern. We use the reduce and recursion or recursion to walk across a list over a list and just work with the elements of that list. We have the strategy pattern. Well, in functional programming, we work with some things that's called tag union types. It's very flexible, and in Java, it's implemented in an ENA. And then, of course, we have the factory pattern, one of the most famous patterns in programming. And in functional programming, we can use high-order functions or querying with that. Okay. So let me show you a bit on how to start with functional programming. So the first thing that's possible and to use is start with map. In JavaScript, this is part of the language. Map is a function that's provided to you on the array construct. So throw away array.push, use map. It allows us at least 3 lines less. Use filter or sum or every. Those sum and every, I don't know if many of you know these things, but they're pretty new in JavaScript. And they're really useful if you want to work with some elements of that list. Figure out reduce. The funny part of it is map and filter or sum or every can also be implemented using just reduce. It's a bit more lines of code, but reduce is basically the cornerstone of these above items. And as an extra, I want to give you this, lenses. These are great. Lenses allow you to look into an object, search for new structures inside that object, modify this new structure if needed, and then forward a copy of the modified whole object. So this is just an immensely useful item to just peek into it and then move and then modify some use some morphisms, as the functional programmers would say. Okay, some code examples in here. Okay, we have map, right? Say we want to mark a object with a certain value. So we have an object, we want to stamp the value of 1 onto it, and then we return the object. This is something that is this is a neat trick, neat JavaScript trick. That comma after the 1 is basically an expression separator. This is if you use these brackets and this comma, then basically it's almost the same as saying putting a semicolon after the 1 and then return object. So this is just a neat trick in JavaScript. So if we do the object.entries, we get the attributes of those entries, and then we map over it, and then on each element we mark it. Very simple, very clean. The filter. Say we want to know if something is private. We create this private function. We call it so-called predicate, and we filter on it. And so we use this object and the entries and the attributes, and we filter only the private ones. And here we have to reduce. Say we want to mark something public. What we can do is we have this function that accepts an accumulator and an entry, and then we want to know the private ones, and then we add the values to that specific accumulator, and then we return it. So in the reduce function, we would say object that entries attributes reduce mark public, and we give it an empty object before that. And here's the lenses part. This is something that I want to give you. Lenses are not something that are added in the language JavaScript itself. You have to use a library for it, or you have to create them yourselves. But the concept is really simple. As I said before, you look into an object, you decide a path that you want to look into, and then you give it your function that you want to make happen on that specific item. So for instance, in this case, I have this ship and I want the mess room to be clean, to be sanitized. So I look into the ship. I made a typo, I see over here, because I said blog, but it should be a ship. I'm looking into the ship. I want to go to the mess room, and I want to sanitize it. And that's something that's clean for inspection. So basically, that's it. This is my talk. I hope you get something out of it. If not, please ask, and I'm here for you.
It was an amazing talk. I was actually in the middle of making some notes, but I do have some questions for you. But before we go into the questions, let's see some of the reactions that we had here. So here we go, from the top to bottom. So yeah, by the way, yeah, there you go. Davidos was mentioning that today he's really enjoying the topics, yours included, because they're all quite engaging and advanced. I mean, we did have some beginner topics in other meetups as well. So yes, we tried to spice it up a little bit. And somebody else, I think Oliver, was asking if it was actually Eric Elliott, the author that you're talking about. I think
Yes.
that's it, right?
Yes, that's him.
Yeah, because I was doing a quick search here as well, and Eric Elliott, I guess he's a pretty famous author. He's got quite a few publications, so good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, isolated or integrated, but not both. I guess we have quotes by you now.
Yeah.
Look at that. No race condition. But
Yeah.
here's an actual question asked in code, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So does console.log functional programming double equals no side effect? Is that true or false?
As I also mentioned, of course, the side effects should be as least as possible, and console.logs are, well, those items are very difficult to manage. Sometimes you need to log something inside your code. Yeah, we cannot escape this. But these are elements that I consider not really part of the business logic, and not part of the and more or less part of something that is something else. And yes, maybe we should even say in aspect-oriented programming we can do all kinds of things, and we should think of that in some way. But yeah, sometimes you have to deal with the stuff that you have to deal with.
And I think it also really depends on who is on the driver's seat, right?
Yeah.
So it's the answer from my professors in college, right? It depends.
Yeah.
So we do have some other quotes here, I guess. So no race condition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that also really depends, right? Because you could get a race condition if you have shared state, even if you're trying to do some functional program.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. You don't want to work with shared state at all. What you're going to do in functional programming is you create a copy of a previous state. There are even some patterns, and we can call them monads. We can call them all kinds of stuff before. But this is something that isolates the state in such a way that you can only work in that container with it, so there will be no race condition.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess for myself as well, because I first started working with Java in the beginning of my career.
Mhm.
And so I came into JavaScript with this object-oriented mindset. And so a lot of the code that I wrote was actually very imperative, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how we used to do things. And then I was amazed by the composition that you can achieve, and by how your code is just cleaner when you actually try to, I guess, implement these principles from functional programming.
Yeah.
And right?
If I may add something, if
Mhm.
you do it correctly, you can create code that reads like prosa, because you can create all these kind of small functions in a library beforehand, and then in your business logic, you just write one-liners. And that's it. There is no loops. There's just, okay, I have this function. I provided a variable. So it just reads like a book.
That's right. Yeah, I guess people overlook the readability aspect of code, but it becomes a very important thing when you start jumping from one job to the other, and then now you're keeping the messy code that somebody left behind.
Yeah.
Let's see. There is a very interesting question. At some point, are you not fighting against JavaScript to do functional programming? Whereas back in the day, I guess languages such as Elixir work with you. Why not switch to front-end functional programming languages like Elm or Reason?
This is a very good question. Okay, on the back end, I can use Elixir, or I can use JavaScript. I like to work with JavaScript because it on a project, because if I work with JavaScript, I can seamlessly switch from back-end work to front-end work these days, because I'm no developer. So it's very easy for me. And I don't like to work with languages that transpile. I don't like to work with TypeScript. Maybe I'm a heretic right now. I don't like to work with TypeScript at all. I don't like to work with CoffeeScript. Give me JavaScript, because these transpilers do something with your code that you're not quite familiar with. You expect a certain behavior, but if you look at the transpiled code, it's always something slightly different than you expected.
That's right. And the thing is, when you go away from functional programming, you start to notice a lot of those unpredictable behaviors, right? I remember, I mean, this I actually lost some years of my life, I think, when I solved this bug. But there was an array that was being passed from function to function. At some point, it was being changed somewhere, but it was impossible to track that. I basically had to go step by step until I found the point at which the array was being changed. And it was just making our application go crazy. So one more question, I guess. Let's see. I'm sorry, but I can't read Arabic, so I wish I could say your name. But he's saying functional programming has its own design patterns, or just we can implement those patterns in function. I think what he means is independently of language. Am I able to use functional programming patterns and still be able to, I guess, use functional programming?
Of course, you can implement these patterns. But if you go in deep into functional programming, you will get to learn all these fancy names like monads, monoids, functors, maps, all that stuff. And if you look into that aspect of functional programming, you will see that design patterns are no longer the way to communicate anymore. Right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said in my presentation, in my opinion, a design pattern is just a vocabulary of words, how to talk about certain aspects of your code. So if you want to stick with a factory pattern, do it. That's fine with me, because it's just the vocabulary that you're using. You don't have to forbade all that stuff that object-oriented programming teaches you. You can just keep working with it. In fact, the mathematics, those are the ones that are very notoriously obsessed by saying, okay, this should be strict. And I'm not that type.
So you're the kind of professor who would say it depends, but
Yeah. I'm not a professor, although my hair might beg to differ, but yeah.
So I just wanted to bring this up real quick. The gentleman who asked the last question, his name is Atef Ben Ali. So thank you very much for your participation, Atef.
Yeah,
so I guess this next question is somewhat of a personal nature. I guess Lucien wants to know more of your personal preference when it comes to Babel.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like Babel either. The funny part is I even worked with Babel a few years ago, and as I said before, it doesn't do exactly what you think it does. So I even created a bug in a bug report for Babel at one point, saying, okay, we have these default values that we can add into in functions in JavaScript that it was introduced a couple of years ago, and you can even use a function for those default values. These functions can throw an exception.
Ooh. So you could get a runtime error then.
You can get a runtime error, and the funny part was the try catch didn't catch that exception because it was asynchronous, and that was a bug inside Babel. So of course every language has these issues, but this is why I want to stick with the original language as much as possible.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. You see, unpredictable stuff, that's when you're really going to a shady place when it comes to programming. But I mean, we do have some comments coming up about TypeScript. I guess people want to hear more about it. And the last question, I guess.
This Mark, no, I know this guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to rant about it.
Oh, is that why you know Mark then?
Yeah, I know Mark.
Oh gosh, dang it. There you go. We're starting some personal feuds in here. But what about TypeScript? I want to hear your thoughts about it, but I guess we just talked about it, right? So, I mean, it's a transpiled language. So, I mean, I guess I can give you my perspective on it. I started using TypeScript at work, right? Because it was a requirement. I did not miss a strongly typed language from my old times of Java. And I really like the... like how quickly you can get something up to speed with JavaScript, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
and another problem that I have with TypeScript is the type safety doesn't cover that many bugs that are the ones that are fatal to your program. Tests are far more important for having a stable program than static type checking has. Yeah,
and I mean, I don't know if most people here are familiar with the S11, but it seems like there are more and more aspects from TypeScript that are being added to JavaScript as a native option, and vice versa. So I mean, up to this point with the S11, I think the only thing we're missing are types, pretty much. And then JavaScript could
let them.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, I'm not hoping for it to happen, but I kind of see this happening, and a lot of people are always asking for libraries to be written in TypeScript as well, so they can get code completion and other tooling as well. So, I mean, I know we have a lot of questions coming up. So we'll close with this one because I guess we could go for the whole night as well. So, Fernando Omar. And how about pure JavaScript with no libraries or frameworks? I guess we're going a little bit too far, right?
You can do it. I mean, you can create your own functions with it. I mean, that's what a framework does for you. Well, right. not a framework does for you, but what all these libraries do for you. I mean, you have Lodash functional, you have Ramda, you have Crocs. I can go on the functional programming libraries, but basically, those libraries are created and tested very much and by a big amount of people. But if you want to use Java, just plain JavaScript, and create your own functional libraries in your own company, go.
It's funny because I mean, I don't know if a lot of people here, as I said, we do have a younger generation here. I don't know if they remember actually writing code in vanilla JavaScript, and that is the reason why we have jQuery, why we have underscore and Lodash and all of those libraries that kind of packaged all of those things that we were tired of rewriting functions for. So, but anyways, Rolf, I just wanted to thank you once again for preparing this presentation for us. It was very engaging. It was very nice to watch. And I really do seriously hope that we can get you back on stage again. And yes, thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome. It was nice having me.
There you go. So, well, this ends one more meetup. This was the meetup number 7 for Frontend Love. I just wanted to thank all of you guys for participating and supporting us in the comments and for asking questions and for showing us what it is that you think about the talks that we had today. And yes, this is going to be available for you. So if you missed some of the talks and you'd like to watch it again, no problem. You can just go to our channel on YouTube and the recording is going to be there. And as usual, we are just very grateful for your support. So please enjoy it, and thank you very much.